what automation does is that it substitutes capital for labor.
It may seem to many people counterintuitive or not even nonsensical that automation could create more jobs.
Listen, I'm going to buy another building. The way New York is, I'm not going to put machines in it. I'm going to put a condominium or a co-op on it and sell it and sit on the beach and collect money every week.
It's really middle skill workers and lower skill workers that are being replaced.
And in doing so, it often was creating jobs of a higher level of skill, or improving the value of skills. So why was this? How did this happen?
You're not automating. Manufacturers aren't automating as much as they should be.
A lot of people think the robots are coming to take their jobs, right?
Welcome to Made in the USA, a show that dives deep into the past, present, and future of American manufacturing. I'm Brent Donaldson.
I'm Pete Zielinski. And in the last episode, we talked about a number of factors that contributed to the decline in manufacturing employment that turned into a plummet in U.S. manufacturing employment for more than a decade, starting around the year 2000. When we look for root causes there, increased reliance on automation is one piece of the puzzle. And in this episode, we're going to talk about that. Automation. Last episode, there were reasons why we said not so fast in response to those who saw automation as the principal explanation for the U.S. manufacturing job declines just after the year 2000. Still, automation played a role. It would be incorrect to say that advances in automation don't affect employment levels. But there's an even more fundamental question that I think we need to answer when we talk about automation. And that question is, to what extent is automation an answer to the skilled workforce shortage? And to what extent is automation versus skilled labor the wrong comparison to make in the first place?
So when a company opens a new manufacturing plant or expands an existing one, we of course celebrate the jobs that will create. But ultimately, and this sounds terrible to even ask, but ultimately, are jobs the point? And by that I mean when it comes to the health and welfare of our economy or of Americans themselves, are jobs the ultimate goal? So on one hand, of course, yes, it's perfectly valid to say that the priority in manufacturing or any other industry is to protect jobs. And if you believe that, then you might also believe that automation, and sticking with manufacturing, we're talking about machine tools that run unsupervised, or software automation, or robots that automate certain tasks. If you're a person who believes that at the end of the day, our industrial sectors have a sacred obligation to provide and protect jobs, then you will look at lights out machining as kind of scary. Like there used to be a person who ran that machine, and now that person is no longer needed.
But the other side of that example is that because the machine shop automated and innovated a way to produce more parts with less people, that shop gets to keep producing. Its customer isn't looking for a cheaper solution because the shop is using technology to produce more. And now that shop keeps the contract, pays its employees, and maybe even grows its business. Lights out machining keeps the lights on. So we're going to talk about automation, its meaning for manufacturing, its meaning for our workforce, and we want to warn you now that automation is a complicated topic with parallel truths that exist at once. But let's start with a simple one, a simple truth. People have been automating for so long that we rarely think about the automation we use in our daily lives, like washing machines, cars, microwaves, automatic bill paying from your checking account, or even a hand cart.
A lot of people think the robots are coming to take their jobs, right?
This is Scott Smith, who you might remember from the first episode. He's the group leader for machining and machine tool research at Oak Ridge National Laboratory.
And there's a lot of articles that are written with that sort of a theme in it. And we're afraid of robots, we're going to lose our jobs. Mm-hmm. But we're not afraid of, hand trucks, for example. Right? One person with a hand truck can carry a lot more boxes than one person without a hand truck. So think of all the jobs that were lost because we bought those hand trucks. But nobody suggests that we go back and just have people carry boxes. We're more productive with the hand trucks. So the argument that I'm making is about increasing the productivity. We have to get more productive. That's the way that I see it. So So how do we do that? What's the strategy in a high wage country? Okay, so we have to innovate.
Scott goes from handcarts to machine tools, and we need a definition here. As we described in the last episode, machine tools are the machines that make machines. They are a technology Brent and I know well. We write about them for Modern Machine Shop magazine. At the same time, talking about manufacturing means talking about machine tools. They are arguably at the foundation of the manufacturing economy, and they are some of the most important representatives of manufacturing automation.
So if I think about machine tools, so what do machine tools look like in a high wage country? Well, they have to be highly automated, right? In a low wage country, you have an operator at every machine, and the machine doesn't have very much in the way of automation because you can't afford that. But you got lots of people there and you're not paying them very much, so if you need more things, you buy more machines and you have more people standing next to those machines, and you just copy that over and over and over. In a high wage country, you can't do that. In a high wage country, you have to figure out a way for one person to produce more things. In a high wage country, you have palletized systems. You have people who are, or even you have robots who are loading parts onto pallets, or people who are loading parts onto pallets.
Economist Robert Atkinson gets a bit more into the weeds on this point.
What you see is manufacturing jobs have grown somewhat since really 2012, 2013. And U.S. manufacturing productivity has always grown faster than non-manufacturing productivity. My point is in the 90s and the 2000s, it was essentially the same, and you had different job losses. So it couldn't have been manufacturing productivity that was killing all those jobs. It had to be something else. But still, manufacturing productivity has always been growing faster than services sector productivity. Think, hospitals, schools, government services, all those things that are hard to automate. But for the last 5 years or so, it's been the opposite. For the first time, really, again, probably in American history, U.S. manufacturing productivity, measured as output per hour of work, is actually growing more slowly than services. And that's one of the reasons why we're seeing manufacturing job growth, because you're not automating. Manufacturers aren't automating as much as they should be. And that, to me, is a big, serious long-term problem, because while in the short run, yeah, sure, we can create some jobs there as the overall economy expands. Companies they get more work, more machine tool work, more machine shop work. They have to add a couple more workers. That's fine in the short run, but in the medium term, if you can't raise your productivity, you lose price competitiveness in global markets. And so I really worry that I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I worry that unless we turn that around, the next big challenge will be, how do we be more competitive with, places like Mexico, or places like Germany, or places like China or India or whatever. U.S. manufacturers, we can't compete on low costs. We want to compete on, good wages, good living standards. But the only way to do that is you have to raise productivity and you have to keep innovating.
So the argument here is how increased productivity is the only way we can compete with low-wage countries. What's productivity? The amount of output per person, using technology to let each person drive more output. But the topic is about more than that. Sometimes it means doing more with the same amount of space. This is especially true in places where space is at a premium, like New York City.
I have some automation here, and I was looking at very sophisticated automation until everything unfolded here, because I needed it to produce. So in New York, for me, automation, people say to me, oh, you need to expand. You're so jammed up in here. Why don't you buy another building? I said, listen, if I'm going to buy another building, with the way New York is, I'm not going to put machines in it. I'm going to put a condominium or a co-op on it and sell it and sit on the beach and collect money every week. So in order for me to expand here, I've, over the past 10, 12 years, gotten rid of older technology machines, CNC machines, but older technology, and brought in machines that can do, that can take the place, one machine can take the place of three. So I brought in mill turns, I brought in a gantry loader, I brought in 5-axis. So that allowed me to expand, but not on a real estate footprint.
Hardinge has been a pioneer in the metal and material cutting industry for more than 130 years. From super precision lathes to innovative Hardinge work holding, Hardinge has been a longtime supporter of American manufacturing, and they are proud to announce the return of the manufacturing of their high precision line of CNC turning and vertical machining center products to the United States in 2021. Hardinge is proudly partnering with Gossiger, Hartwig, and Morris Group Incorporated to distribute these products directly to its American customers. For more information, visit hardinge.com. Hardinge, made in the USA. So right before the ad, we were listening to Mike DiMarino, owner of a machine shop in New York City called Linda Tool. And incidentally, Pete, you and I have been in Mike's shop in Brooklyn, and he is not kidding when he says that he takes advantage of every square foot of that space. He's got a rooftop garden where he grows herbs and flowers and some unusual varieties of tomatoes. That's super cool. At any rate, his arguments are right. He can't expand his footprint, and he's limited to how many employees he can fit in his current space. So growing the business means increasing productivity with the employees that he has. But obviously, he still needs people. I think we need to be careful not to confuse automation with automatic. People need to program these CNC machines to design the parts, to run measurements and do QC. And so at some point you have to ask, even if he had room to grow, would he hire more people?
So if you look at, in a highly automated system, there's a lot more machines than there are shop floor workers. Mm-hmm. One person on the floor runs a lot of different machines. But altogether, there's a lot more people than there are machines because it created all kinds of new jobs to do that. So you have the NC programmers and the process planners and all of that kind of stuff. The workers, they're supervisors rather than operators. A lot of people, when they talk about the loss of the jobs, they have in their mind the people who put the workpiece in the machine and push the button. But I think you've got to look at all the jobs, right?
So there it is. You have to look at all the jobs. And economists have done that, or tried to. And let's accept that as a nation, we're more competitive in manufacturing if we embrace automation. But there are costs, and we have to be real about that too. And those costs are not distributed evenly throughout the country. At the regional level, in communities that benefit from manufacturing plants, it is at best a mixed blessing, and maybe a net loss, if those plants advance into greater automation.
What automation does is that it substitutes capital for labor.
This is Darren Asamoglu, professor of economics at MIT.
And that's why it's been such a powerful trend because, in many things, if you can efficiently use it, capital would be cheaper. And that's why employers find it profitable to use robots. You see that some of the sectors that have switched to robots, like car manufacturing, have increased their productivity substantially. But that means that capital owners gain to some degree, and also this enables to some extent cheaper cars being manufactured. And what we do is that we use data and estimates from a variety of sources to compute what the impact of this would be on prices and gains for other parts of the economy. And it turns out, those gains are important, but they're not enough to make up for the employment losses that have happened in the areas where manufacturing used to concentrate.
Okay, so yes, clearly there are costs associated with automation. He's not making a value judgment there. We're better off to some extent having cheaper cars, for instance. But there is a cost, and the cost is often localized. And the result of that is, ironically, that at the local level, some people might hope their manufacturing plants don't actually become too technologically advanced.
To be fair, I think plenty of people would have a problem with this line of argument. It seems to suggest we should go slow on automating or not automate at all. It also seems to contradict the world we see. We have jobs in this society, this technologically advanced society. Even during a time when unemployment is high, most people who want a job can have a job. even in a society with lots of automation. We mentioned washing machines as an example of automation. If people don't have to do their wash by hand, doesn't this set them free to do more productive work? Doesn't automation in the end ultimately lead to more jobs or better jobs? It seems to. How does this happen? This gets back to the question we asked earlier. To what extent is automation an answer to the skilled workforce shortage? And to what extent is automation versus skilled labor the wrong comparison to make in the first place?
Yeah, I think it's the wrong comparison.
This is James Besson, Executive Director of the Technology and Policy Research Initiative at the Boston University School of Law, and someone who writes frequently about automation.
Automation can have the effect of increasing the demand for skilled labor. I think historically that's often been the case. If you look at something like the textile industry, we think about today the textile industry, automation is something that destroys jobs. And employment in textiles has been going down since the late 1940s in the U.S. Part of that is because of global trade, but only the most recent years is that true. But for over 100 years before that, automation was accompanied by growing employment in the textile industry and many other industries as well. It may seem to many people counterintuitive or not even nonsensical that automation could create more jobs. And in doing so, it often was creating jobs of a higher level of skill or improving the value of skills. So why was this? How did this happen? Think about textiles. At the time they began automating textiles in the early 19th century, cloth was extremely expensive. A typical person only had one set of clothing. When automation came along, it reduced the amount of labor needed to produce a yard of cloth, but in a competitive market, that meant that the price went down. Well, the price went down, and now all of a sudden people could afford more cloth, and they bought a whole lot more cloth. In fact, so much more cloth that the number of textile workers increased, even though the labor per yard went down. That was true for, like I said, 100 years, over 100 years. You get to the mid-20th century, though, and all of a sudden people have lots of cloth. They've got full closets. They've got cloth furniture upholstery. They've got draperies. All sorts of uses of cloth. Automation is still chugging along. It's still reducing the relative price of cloth, but demand just doesn't go up that much like it did in the beginning. Demand has become satiated, and so at that point, the labor-reducing side of automation takes hold. Today, I think in manufacturing, automation there seems to be some studies suggesting automation is very closely related to upskilling. That they may reduce certain kinds of labor, but at the same time they're increasing demand for more skilled workers.
So here we have a situation where automation led to an increase in jobs, but only because an expensive product became super cheap and totally changed the market. Of course, that's not happening anymore. Textile demand has been stable and employment is no longer growing. So when you talk about automation increasing low-skill jobs, you need a case like that, an expensive product becoming really cheap. Could we get to really cheap cars, really cheap cell phones? You don't see the trend line moving in that direction, or at least I don't. Meanwhile, it's not just manual labor workers whose work can be displaced by automation. We mentioned software is automation as well. Not just manual work, but also mental work can be automated. Rob Ireton is a plant manager at Plethora, another company that does CNC machining. In addition to using automation on the plant floor, this company uses software automation to get the job ready for machining, and that is just as important.
So most of our automation right now is focused on the software, which is, as I mentioned earlier, it's the user interface. It is the interaction with the customer on the front end. And then in the background, our proprietary software is doing the analysis of the parts, and then it is moving that information into our programmers, which we currently have a bank of traditional programmers that take that data, and if it's good to go, they release it to the machine. If they need to make some changes, whether they're going to add some tools or something along those lines, they'll do that. We had a study done a couple months ago, and within the $20 billion machining industry, the quick turn R&D focus is 7 to 9 billion of that. And that's where we live, and I think that's one of the reasons why we are expanding, is because we have a philosophy of delivering high-quality parts in the shortest amount of time possible.
This is weird to say out loud, but it's an important point. Thinking takes time. But by automating thinking, this company can run smaller orders faster, deliver them faster, and take on a lot more of this small order work. And in this case, we're not just talking about button pushers or low-skill manual laborers. Automation replaces knowledge work as well.
CNC machine tools are a kind of automation, and those machine tools have replaced machines that were not automated at some point in the past anyway, but the new machines are computer controlled. They have to be programmed. Therefore, many machine shops today employ CNC programmers, and that is a type of job that didn't exist before machining became more automated. So this all goes back to what Scott Smith was talking about. The final tally has to include all the jobs.
I think we've arrived at the point where this topic becomes really complicated. Automation creates new categories of employment. Automation creates jobs. But certain communities lose out from automation. The boom in textiles jobs from automation isn't likely to happen again. And not only that, we now understand how we can automate certain quote-unquote thinking jobs. So which is it? Does automation kill jobs or create them? And the answer is yes, both.
Once you continue the right line of reasoning that I was talking about earlier, automation, robotics would be one part of it, but it's true for computerized numerical control, and other types of automation also. They substitute capital for workers, but much of that takes place at the lower end of the skill distribution. You're not replacing engineers. You're not even replacing technicians. It's really workers, middle skill workers and lower skill workers that are being replaced. And that puts pressure on the wages of these workers and tends to contribute to inequality.
Asamoglu said that with automation, capital replaces labor, or at least some labor. It also demands other types of labor, and as anyone in manufacturing can attest, there is not enough supply of this new type of labor. That is a problem. We are building more advanced pieces of automation faster than we can adapt people's skills to run that automation. Our wages reflect this. People who can program and run this kind of automation are in demand. Thankfully, and this is the point that we'll finish on, there are examples of how we can meet that demand.
Well, I think it's complicated with skilled worker, but we have some other work which shows that for other countries, and this will happen for the U.S. later on also, that are in the midst of rapid demographic change, automation is a very powerful tool. So if you look at Germany, South Korea, Japan, three of the most rapidly aging economies, they are facing acute shortages of middle-aged workers, and those are the workers that typically focus on in blue-collar occupations in manufacturing, and without anything else, without any response from technology, manufacturing in these economies would have been heavily damaged. As it happened, Japan, South Korea, and Germany have increased their share of international trade in manufacturing. They have continued to make inroads in manufacturing growth. How did they do that? They did that by responding massively to their demographic trends and investing in automation. And in fact, becoming leaders in the technologies of automation in the world. Now, that's less easy with skills because so far the automation technologies that we have don't perform the tasks that skilled workers used to perform. So when U.S. employers complain about lack of skills, they're really asking for workers with high technical capacity, ability to flexibly switch from one task to the other, some knowledge of engineering, and all of these are tasks that at the moment machines cannot perform. Some people think AI just around the corner is going to start doing what robotics did to middle-skilled blue-collar occupations in manufacturing. AI is going to do for higher-skilled workers in, finance and accounting and medicine and so on. We'll see about that. I think it's optimistic to think that's just around the corner. But manufacturing automation is not really going to be able to replace the very trained, highly skilled engineering, design, and technical workers.
Okay, let's wrap this up. So there are high skill and low skill employees in manufacturing. A better way to think about it might be high expertise work versus repetitive work, even though some of that repetitive work is actually pretty high knowledge. But it's because of this difference that automation actually needs more employees at the higher end. Pete, you and I see this all the time when we write about machining. The machine shop owner who says that he would buy another CNC machine tool if only he could find another skilled machinist or programmer to run it. This is the skills gap that we talk about all the time. On the one hand, automation displaces and replaces jobs. On the other hand, it needs more jobs. It can't perform if the right people with the right expertise aren't there.
Right. At the beginning of this episode, we asked, to what extent are jobs sort of the point of manufacturing? On the one hand, the point of manufacturing is to make the stuff that humans want and require. So, if jobs are not the point of manufacturing, why do we worry so much about how many people are employed in manufacturing? Why does the graph that looks like a literal cliff where jobs plummeted from in the early 2000s concern us? Clearly, jobs are not beside the point. The issue is more complex than that. Manufacturing is necessary work. Work that to some extent defines the health of a nation. Manufacturing is valuable work, including valuable work for people to do because it is work that directly involves value creation by making objects people want or need. And manufacturing is work that, even when it is automated, needs people. We are doing this podcast because manufacturing is worth understanding, because it's worth encouraging, and Americans want our manufacturing to be made in the USA because it's work we ought to want our country and people in our communities to be doing. But the commitment to manufacturing means a commitment to preparing people for manufacturing, even as we advance manufacturing so every person in it can do more and more. Companies need to be involved in this. The public sector and the school system need to be involved in this. The question that we as a country can answer is, will automation harm communities by costing jobs even as it struggles to deliver its full promise? Or will automation thrive because we have the people who are ready to adapt to the new roles able to oversee this automation?
Made in the USA is a production of Modern Machine Shop and published by Gardner Business Media. This series is written and produced by me, Brent Donaldson, and by Peter Zielinski. I also edit the show. This season of Made in the USA is sponsored by Hardinge, and this podcast was recorded at the historic Herzog Studio, home of the nonprofit Cincinnati USA Music Heritage Foundation. Our outro theme song is by The Hiders. If you enjoyed this episode, it would be really cool if you could go leave us a nice review. You can send us an email at madeintheusa@gardnerweb.com or check us out online at mmsonline.com/madeintheusa podcast. So for our next episode, we really wanted to beat ourselves up good and proper. We are going to sort out the benefits and challenges of keeping production in the United States, a look into our manufacturing supply chains, next time on Made in the USA.